Welcome to Streams of Income, hosted by best-selling author and entrepreneur Dr. David Powers, where we discuss streams of income, passive income, residual income, and even why there are dinosaurs and zombies in this intro. Fasten your seatbelts and get ready to dive in.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Streams of Income podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you are willing to give me some of your time to listen to either a business lesson or an interview with an amazing entrepreneur. So once again, thank you for listening to the Streams of Income podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. All right. So we are here with Dr. Erika Rasure, and I didn't talk to her much before this started because I'll be honest with you, Dr. Erika, if I get into a conversation at all before we get started, that's when the best stuff comes out, and then I wish I'd been recording it.
Truth. Oh my gosh, I've been in that situation more than once, and you're so right.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you what, I've got your bio here, and instead of reading the whole thing, I always kind of like to let the guest introduce themselves with, because you can tell us what you feel is the most important thing we need to know about you. So can you give us a quick intro for you?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing to know about me is that I'm a financial therapist. So, and most people have no idea what a financial therapist is. I've gotten that question so many times. And a financial therapist is someone who really, gets into the emotional, relational, behavioral, and cognitive aspects of why we are the way we are with our money. Money is not just numbers, it's deeply emotional. And so I've been doing this kind of work for 21 years. In my current role, I serve as the Chief Financial Wellness Advisor for Beyond Finance, which I love because I get to share, all of this with people who are really struggling with debt. And it's my life's work, and I'm honored to get to do it.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And reading your bio, I love the change in some of the wording because financial therapist. All right. So my first question, because you already answered what is a financial therapist. My first big question, and probably one you get a lot, is anytime you hear personal finance, Dave Ramsey comes up. And of course, I've been through all his stuff. And so, but his stuff is more practical advice. He doesn't usually get into the emotion other than being mad at that. And so how would you differ from like the Dave Ramsey type stuff?
Yeah. So, I really appreciate Dave Ramsey's work for a lot of reasons because, like you said, he is very practical. And I actually think in the last couple of years, maybe he softened up a little bit. You get the idea. Do you know what I'm talking about?
As he loses his hair, he gets a little more chill.
Yeah. But, I really think that, when it comes to integrating emotions, it's so important to know that, like, even if you were to do all of Dave Ramsey's steps, right, and you were really successful doing that, would you be able to enjoy it if you still felt emotionally raw and vulnerable around money? If you couldn't have, really easy and joyful conversations with your partner around money and share that with your kids and go to sleep at night feeling peaceful, you might have everything figured out debt-wise or in the bank. But if you still don't feel right and aligned with your money, you're not going to be able to enjoy it. And isn't that kind of the point, to be at peace with all of this?
Yeah, exactly. I've even heard Dave say, because, he's got this big thing about being gazelle intense while you're getting out of debt. But I've even heard him admit that people have trouble stopping the gazelle intensity. And like my dad, for instance, he's got plenty of money and he'll fret for weeks over buying a $500 bicycle. He can't enjoy the money he's got.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and I think that really happens, I think a lot of that, is kind of like when you're dieting almost, and you really get into your fitness and you're counting your macros and you're weighing your food and, you're doing your 2-3 sessions a week and you want to keep that momentum. But sometimes in that momentum becomes an obsession, and it's a tipping of the scales the other way. And so you have to understand and realize, okay, I was here before and now I'm over here. I've got to figure out a way to kind of swing back in the middle. And that's a very common thing. And, it just takes practice like anything else. You've got to practice and work at, getting out of debt and getting your money right. But sometimes you also have to practice on what it means to actually use that money. You can't take it with you when you die.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And it's kind of weird how too much of a good thing can ruin the good thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So financial, I mean, we're talking about therapy and wellness, and I love the approach because I mean, when I'm working with my small business clients, some of the first things I try to, it's not always, hey, let's start a business, let's do this thing. Sometimes it's let's get your financial house in order, let's get your fitness in order. Especially as we get older. I mean, I'm over 50 now, and so things change when you hit 40 and more. And so, what is your approach to bringing in like the holistic into financial?
Yeah. So, a lot of people I work with, they have kind of a concept of what, it means to be financially literate. Like I'm supposed to know XYZ about money, and sometimes I don't, which is hard for people to admit because I think general personal financial education has really taught people that, you are supposed to be a certain place by a certain age. And if you're not, then you're a lost cause. And then it prevents people from, reaching out and getting help. None of us have to know everything about everything. But I think when it comes to our money, there's this expectation that we do because it's not something we talk about. And there's it's a whole world of just black and whites, which can be, it just makes you feel bad about yourself. And so when we're thinking about bringing all these things together, again, it's understanding that financial wellness is really getting into that space where you feel not just financially literate, but you feel like you've got this sense of, okay, this feels good. I've made it to this point, and this is what it feels like in my body. And this is how it shows up in my interactions with my purchases, or when I'm playing with my kids, or when I'm enjoying free time. It is the values you have that have been able to manifest outwardly and enjoy it and feel, like you've accomplished more than just learning and becoming financially literate.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And yeah, just the idea that, when you get out of debt, or even while you're going through it, seeing the hope at the end of the tunnel, it's not just a constant struggle and then more struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think hope is one of the biggest things. And that's been my running theme for the year. Sometimes I set a value word for myself. I don't do resolutions. But if I'm going to run off a theme, I generally pick a value for the year. And this year, the word I picked was hope. And I think for so many people who are going through, massive amounts of a debt situation. Mm-hmm. And, like I said, in the last, 20 years, I've been doing this, 21 years, I've been doing this. And something interesting I've learned is that, people, when they come to the financial condition of being in debt, and I call it a financial condition because it's not a permanent thing, it's something we deal with and we move on. So when you're in the financial condition of debt, it's usually because life in some way has gotten you there. So the people I work with, it's the people who have survived breast cancer and, put their additional expenses on a credit card just to live, or, they had a child that was diagnosed with the disease, or they lost their partner, and in their grief, they spent everything, trying to fill an emotional hole.
Yeah.
And so when you have all of those things going on, and then you find yourself in this bad financial condition because you've been conditioned to think that all of this is bad and you're a terrible person and you're not, there becomes this separation, and you don't feel very hopeful. You don't feel like there is anything you can do. You've called your creditors and they've said, well, I'm really sorry that you're going through cancer, but we can't set up anything for you.
Yeah.
That becomes a very different situation where people do feel hopeless. And not only that, they feel powerless and they feel like there's something wrong with them, which is where that shame shows up.
Oh, yeah. See, I didn't even think about that. I was just thinking like the typical family with credit card debt and college and all that. But I can't imagine what it would feel like to say, I survived cancer, I beat this thing, and now I've got $1 million in credit card debt and a second mortgage on the house. That would be horrible. I didn't even think that far down.
Yeah. And what's interesting, to me is that is what's more typical. What is less typical and what I see are the people who are just kind of keeping up with the Joneses. I'm just putting on credit cards because I need to show up that way. That's not, the majority of who I work with and who I see. Because life can be a real bummer sometimes. And sometimes those life transitions, life events that of course none of us can plan for or predict are very expensive. Mm-hmm. And we don't have, a structure. Most families don't have a structure on how to deal with something catastrophic. I am a true believer that we're all, I don't care how educated you are, how much money you make, all of us are one major life event away from huge amounts.
Oh, yeah. 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 I mean, all it takes is one car wreck, one medical illness, I mean, one emergency room visit, depending on what it is. I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
So I was reading in your thing, you are a certified deep transformational coach. And so tell us about what exactly that is.
Yeah, so I like to think so. I'm a certified financial therapist, and I'm a certified deep transformational coach. And I do get asked that question. What's kind of the difference between the two? Well, financial therapy, like I said, is really rooted in that emotional and relational, behavioral aspects, where that healing has to begin. Where we look at kind of the past aspects of things. Intergenerational money stories. Where you got your values, how they're showing up, things we need to kind of work on. But what I found so interesting. And I don't think this is a limitation of financial therapy at all, because it makes a huge difference. But I had so many clients that I worked with over the years that, we'd go through the therapy parts of it and get there. And then it's like, okay, now what do we do? So, so the deep transformational coaching is really that next step. That's what I use in my coaching practice. Is to move from a place to where you are fully embodied. You start to drop, and that's where the therapy comes in. You drop this personal gravity that holds you down, and you learn to let that go. And then you get to this point where you've got this propulsion system that gets you moving forward. And that's where that deep work comes in. And that is very much an inside job. And there has to be readiness. It's so interesting too, because you have to listen for the readiness. You can say, okay, I'm ready to make these changes. I'm ready to do this. But if you're not ready to do it, it's not going to happen. So deep transformational coaching doesn't work unless you're ready for it.
Yeah. So if I'm picturing this right, I mean, I love metaphors. So I'm picturing the whole debt journey as like climbing out of this valley. And once you get out of the valley and you can see the sunlight, then you see this mountain, and that's the transformational coaching. I'm going to climb this mountain now and just move beyond everything that's held me back.
Exactly. It's if you want to do this, financial therapy is getting to base camp on Everest, right? And then, when you're trying to summit, that is that transformational work. It's really challenging yourself and pushing not to your limits, but really challenging yourself in this process of becoming into this being. It's a process of really embodying, who you are. And I would say at a very deep spiritual and soul level, because that's a huge part of this too, is being able to change all of that in your relationship with yourself and whatever else needs a relationship overhaul.
Oh yeah. No, that's pretty amazing. And my metaphor, you're welcome to use that. I won't copyright that. You can have that one.
That is a good
one. So let's see. I'm going to get ahead of myself if I don't look at my questions first. And so loud budgeting, I saw that mentioned in your bio. What exactly is that? It sounds like I want to scream when I'm budgeting. So.
And I love that you say it that way, because that's what I really want people to do. That's also how I envision it. Did you ever watch The Office?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's an episode where Michael Scott is kind of like saying, okay, I think I'm going to have to declare bankruptcy. And then he decides he's going to do it. And then he actually goes into the office and says to everybody, I declare bankruptcy. That's always in my mind what comes to loud budgeting. And it's what I was mentioning earlier. We often don't talk about money matters all that much, and there's so much good and bad. Savings is good and debt is just bad. And so, if people aren't willing to talk about money when it's good, when was the last time, you were sitting with friends and it's around the holidays and you're like, I got a $20,000 Christmas bonus and I'm going to go put in a pool like Clark Griswold, even though pools don't cost $20,000 now, they're way more expensive. But people aren't talking about that, when things are good. And so when somebody's $20,000 or $40,000 or $80,000 in debt, it's really hard to, talk about that. And loud budgeting is really kind of this encouragement to share with your friends and your family and your circle and say, you know what? Maybe I do need to pay off some debt. I'm going to start declining offers to go out. And I'm going to say it's because I'm really working hard on my financial goals and I'm trying to get out of debt. Can we do something else that's maybe free, or, just find I'll go to the dinner, but I'm not going to go to the movie afterward, trying to find this compromise. And the people I've worked with who've really, implemented this idea of loud budgeting, because it's kind of a brave thing to do. Not everybody, you don't know how people are going to respond. But overwhelmingly, the majority of the anecdotal evidence I've observed is that once people start talking about money in their close circles, everybody starts talking about it.
Yeah.
And so this interesting, kind of synergy starts. And, we're not always going to share all the parts of our financial lives, or we don't share all parts of ourselves anyway, right? But it can really open up those conversations to where you can call a friend. And, I have this with my, friends, we're in our 40s now, but, it's, calling my friend and she's like, I just got, this offer for this salary and this bonus, and these are the exact numbers. What do you think? Yeah. Hearing exactly those numbers is mind blowing, because, 10, 15 years ago, nobody talked about salaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Cause I grew up in a household where my parents never talked about money. And then when I hit 18, they went out and helped me get my first credit card and figuring out how to do that, which, it was the wrong kind of education. Like, they were helping me set up my credit and all that, which, depending on how you look at it, could be good or bad. But the education I got was not really what I needed. That stuff would have just happened, but I would have loved to have known what my dad made. Like, when we were struggling and, they couldn't buy me the snacks I wanted when I was a teenager because I would eat way too much. I would have loved to have known why. Yeah. Like, how much are we over budget on groceries, And
yeah. And I think that's a sentiment from a lot of people. And, what I think is interesting, is I don't think your parents did anything, wrong in terms of how they set you up, because that's how they were set up. Right.
Yeah.
The credit card system, that's what you do. You turn 18, you need a credit card because you need to start building credit, because that's the first, stepping stone to make sure that you can buy a home and all of those things. And so for that generation, and this is where, those generational differences really start to show up, is there was a prescribed formula of how life went. Yeah. And what we started learning is our experience was not theirs. And while, they weren't doing anything wrong, their values showed up in the way we were taught. And so I think for, people, our age, and even these newer generations, these, Gen Zers, they're incredible at what they do. They'll talk about anything, and nothing's really off limits, which I really admire and love. But for some of us who are the Gen Xers and the elder millennials like myself, it's kind of unlearning some of these things, and trying to figure out, okay, well, how am I going to teach my kids about this, or my grandkids? How am I going to show up for them? Even like talking with my own kids when they ask me, how much I make and how much the house cost. Or the car costs. I've been doing this for a long time. This is my job. And even I hesitate. I'm like, I know it's good for them to know, but like, there's something that happens in my chest, and I'm like, I don't know how to answer that. Or how should
my biggest thing with my kids has been, because we tell them everything. When times are bad, we tell them, hey, we've got to go light on the groceries this month, or whatever. But I have trouble not going negative, like it's seeming like a negative thing instead of just, it's a factual thing I want you to know.
Yeah. And it's all about the delivery, right? It's all about the context. If you can tell your kids in a very age appropriate way, this is what we can do with our budget this month, and it changes. And this is why it changes. That way they're set up for this idea of success, that things aren't always linear, that, there's times of feast or famine, and there's a whole lot of controversy around that, and how to budget with, if you're a gig worker and you've got, 3 months of a contract, then you have 3 months of work. Like, how do you manage all of that? But those are important lessons. And I think the more open we are with our kids, when they ask questions about money, or you say, hey, that's above my budget this month. It shapes their worldview. And even more so, this is the thing I love most about having conversations with kids around money. It makes it real for them. Yeah. You're not hiding anything. You're not putting up a veneer. You're not saying, oh my God, we're going broke. And, it's terrible. And you're not scaring them. But what it does is allows them, as they grow up, to say, okay, I made a mistake with money. Like, I opened up a credit card at college and I charged $10,000. What do I do? They're going to come to you.
Yeah. And not be afraid to.
And not be afraid to.
Yeah. 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 Because I mean, I haven't been a W-2 worker for 20 years now. And I mean, you know what that life is like. Its income is crazy.
It is. It is. And so you have to, be prepared, for those times where, your contracts might not be as steady as they were, or, something changes, and, it's hard to put yourself in that spot where you're trying to juggle so many goals all at once. It's taxes, it's savings, it's trying to mentally juggle this. And of course we have life stuff that comes up, the water heater breaks, or you need a new car, all of that stuff happens. And, I think the greatest thing people can do for themselves is to just meet themselves where they are and bring awareness to their situation. It's great being a contract worker. It's great, being able to do that. And there's nothing wrong with income being variable. It's how you plan for it. Yeah. And for a lot of people who are transitioning from, and I've seen this too, transitioning from W-2 to contract work or freelance, or however that you want to call it, that's one of the biggest challenges. And they don't understand it until they're like in it, and they're like, oh, I shouldn't have spent that money over the last 3 months. Oh, this is the price tax bill. Here's my quarterly payment.
Oh yeah. No, and that's what I do is, like, my main audience is moms and dads that want to escape W-2 for, to come home, spend more time with the kids, run their own business. And I have to be very careful with the path I put them on, because most of them want to just quit their job and then go spend 20 grand on the home office. And next thing you know, 2 weeks later, they're having to get another job because they screwed up.
Exactly. And I think there's, and I don't know how you coach people through this, but I think it's very common for people to just get fed up with the 9 to 5 and, having to work for somebody else. And, I'm not here to make a judgment on all of that, but I also think the 9 to 5 has been, criticized too much, again, finding that balance. And so I think when people, want to, think about, running their own business and doing all of that, they put so much effort into the home office or building the website. And it's very much running before we walk. I also think it's okay to continue to work, and try proof of concept and get out there in that way. And sometimes, life situations, you might get laid off, and that's the perfect time to kind of transition.
That's the off-ramp.
Yeah, that's for a lot of people, it's definitely the off-ramp. But with anything, it's patience. It's being able to trust yourself to get off safely at the off-ramp.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's like I say, if they've got a good job, I mean, and they've usually got insurance with the good job and all that. I do a slow off-ramp where it's like, why don't you try this thing, work on it on the weekends, build it slow, and until you're making at least 50% or more of what you're making in your job, don't even think about quitting.
Yeah.
Because at that point, it's not safe.
No, it's not. And I think people, have really high hopes. Back to that hope word, when they're excited, but there's all that emotion, all that adrenaline running, when you've decided something, and there's kind of the beginner's, I don't know, feeling of freedom. Once you've made that, do you know what I'm talking about? Once you've made that decision to work,
it's almost like
yourself,
a dopamine hit. It's just,
like the biggest dopamine hit, and it feels so good. But that is like prime time to make decisions that do not go well. And I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree with you more. That's a lot of, how I off ramped, from academia into my own practice is, I really thought about it. I did make the decision, and boy, did I get that dopamine hit, but I had to have, proof that like this is something I can do. I can actually do this. And it took me, a little bit to get there, but you get there. Patience is a thing, right? We have to be patient.
Yeah, I definitely don't do a burn the boats kind of a scenario. Not unless you hit it big somehow, and all of a sudden you're making 10 times what you make at the W-2 job.
Sure. Absolutely.
Which does happen occasionally, but not very often. I mean, that's what people see the stories about, but that's so very little of what happens. Yeah.
And just having those good expectations, realistic expectations. It's like when people, first try and, to, clean up their finances a little bit. There's this urge to, I got to do it all. If I don't do it all, I'm a failure. And it's like, no, just take one thing to tackle this week and see how that goes. And, we're not about, it's always, to me, it's progress over perfection. I'm sure you've heard that ad nauseum, right? But I think it is so true, because when we're focused on progress, it makes such a difference, especially it's like a wrestling thing, but like progress over outcome, and all of that. Like, it makes a huge difference in the way you feel about yourself, and not feeling that you're failing or falling behind because you haven't been able to keep up with whoever's telling you to you have to do all these things. No, you still answer to yourself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep. And all right. So as we start moving towards the closing out part, I got a couple of big questions for you. So, so knowing that my main audience is like mom and dad, W-2 to entrepreneur for the most part, what would be like your biggest piece of advice for them?
I mean, if we're talking mom and dad here, the communication aspect is so key.
Yeah.
Really understanding what your shared values are, your individual values, and having that vision for each other, your individual autonomy and your family. What does that look like? What does it feel like? And having those conversations regularly. I'm a big fan of the money date, where you create a ritual around having conversations specifically around money. You send the kids to grandma's or whatever that looks like, and you get your favorite takeout, Domino's or whatever it looks like, and you just sit and you talk about it. You create an environment that is open and welcoming, to where you can share your wins, your fears, all of those things, in a place where it feels non-judgmental. The more you can do that and open those lines of communication, it doesn't have to be a formal money date. You can do it while you're unloading the dishwasher, for all I care. Yeah. But it needs to happen. So there isn't those things that kill relationships, resentment being one of them, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And we always hear the stat about, finances leading to divorce so often.
Yeah. And I think there's even that extra layer there, is being a small business owner is tough. There are things that come up that you could have never imagined in a million scenarios. And that's an extra kind of strain on the unit. Unit. I mean, it's multi-layered. And if you or both of you are not W-2 and you don't have steady income or insurance, and somebody gets sick, I mean, just the basic kind of sick, I need to take the kid to urgent care. Those things can feel catastrophic. So talking about all of that regularly, and having a plan in place if something big does happen, how are we going to handle it? And how are we going to treat each other in the process?
Oh, yeah. And I love that this is like part of the holistic approach. I mean, not just the wellness therapy and all that together, but finances is a whole family thing. I mean, it's not just the husband or the wife doing the finances and they do it alone and everything. It's somebody's doing it, they're doing it together, whatever, but they're always talking about it. Everybody's, even the kids who don't make big decisions are in on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that can show up around like things like gift giving. I think is a great way to start introducing your kids to some of those types of things. All right, this is our budget for gifts. Do you want it in cash? Do you want it in presents, or do you want to invest it? There's all these different things you can do to start teaching your kids these lessons, including them, and doing the books for your business. Yeah. Just having them sit next to you, they can do their homework, and you have those conversations. You keep it open and transparent, and that's what you are going to create. And you're creating the next generation of hopefully, if it was my hope, loud little ones with big mouths when it comes to money. So we reduce this stigma altogether.
Yeah, I love it. And I've got it easy because I've got 5 kids, but we homeschool them. And so personal finance is required subject for our math classes.
Yeah, that's so fun. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, everything from computing, how much is this item on sale when they're younger to, to balancing a checkbook and everything else.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So very last question. It's kind of it's a bit of a multi-parter. So your top 3 resources, like books, podcasts, anything, not just for finance, but like what do you see as a person needs to read or partake of this for success in life?
Oh, that's a really good question. So, a couple books come to mind. I really like Morgan Housel's Psychology of Money. I think that's a good read. I also love Viktor Frankl's A Man's Search for Meaning.
Ooh, that one comes up a lot.
And the reason I like that one so much, especially, if you're going through a major life transition, with or without the money component. Money touches everything. And so if you're going through a major life event, life-changing event, how you show up for yourself and others, I think is so critically important. And so those two books I think are phenomenal.
Yeah.
When it comes to resources, if you are, struggling with debt, if you are to the point where, you're making minimum payments and you can't get your head above water, and you've tried everything, you've done Dave's methods, you've just done it all and it's not working, get some help, ask for some help. Like I said, I work with Beyond Finance. I do their financial wellness sessions and everything financial wellness. If you go to their website, there's financial wellness resources. I've got so much stuff up there, to kind of help, make you feel like you're not doing something wrong. You're not a failure if you're in debt. Debt is something you have. It's not who you are. And just, making sure that, when you are thinking about your money and you're thinking about yourself and in your relationship to your money, it's an ongoing thing. And just because you've made mistakes doesn't mean that you are a mistake. And there's plenty of time to have a redemption arc, if you want to call it that.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. And so what's the place where you want people to get in touch with you to find all your socials and everything?
Yeah, so I only have one social media. I only do LinkedIn. I got rid of my other stuff a long time ago. But you feel free to send me a DM on LinkedIn, drop me a note, saying that you found me on this podcast. So I know you're not a scammer. That's always good. But you can also find me at beyondfinance.com, and all of my financial wellness stuff is at the very top of the page. You can click there, and all kinds of stuff to help you hopefully feel a little bit better with your money, a little less stressed.
Yeah.
And
I love it. Awesome. So, you not only do you teach things a little different from Dave Ramsey, though, but no matter how soft he's gotten in his later years, you're a whole different personality type. And so, I love that people have different options, because not everybody's going to resonate with Dave. And so people need people like you who are more hopeful, more chill, and not going to yell at them.
Yeah, and some of that stuff works. I don't know if you've ever watched any of Caleb Hammer's stuff or Dave, but yeah, I generally consider myself a little bit more on the chill side. But I do want to give those voices some credit, because often those are the first voices where people go to, and there are beautiful gems, and how if you're brand new to personal finance, sometimes that's exactly the content you need to start your journey. And we all have to start somewhere. And I think that's the valuable place for, Dave and others is getting people started. Because most people haven't had a chance to get started. And the majority of Americans have not had any sort of personal financial education. If they did, it was for a couple hours in high school, maybe.
Yeah. And not even that, not that thorough or good, really.
Exactly.
All I remember is I learned how to write a check. Was home ec class in high school.
That's all I remember too.
Yeah.
Nothing useful like how to, file your taxes or any of that stuff. But
and then you go to college and they hit you with the FAFSA and the student loans and all that mess, and you have, before you realize it, you're under all that weight and water, and it's crazy. Well, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
and,
it was great.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I promised that was the end. But one last thing, and maybe this can benefit you as well. If you have any suggestions for someone you'd like to see on the podcast, feel free to send me their information or just their name. And if I like the idea, I'll try to look them up myself. But any suggestions, no matter how crazy, no matter how, well, especially if it's cool, well, crazy also, just send me your suggestions. And also, if you want to be on the podcast, get in touch with me. My email, all my contact info is in the show notes. Also, if you don't want to look at the show notes, or you're in your car, maybe you shouldn't look at the show notes while you're driving. It's redteamgoals.com. You can get all my links and everything else there. So let me know your suggestions and tell me more about yourself if you'd like to be on the podcast as well. Thanks again for listening.